What's up, Internet? You're tuning in episode 38 of the Steam Deck podcast, Slipscreen Games weekly podcast, all about Valve's portable PC powerhouse, the Steam Deck. I'm your host, Pete and Bessie, joined as always by my very good friend and co-host, Mr. Max Wright.
Ahoy, ahoy, ahoy. That's 3.5 ahoys.
3.5. Okay, I was like, are you choking? Do I need to call someone to help you? Well,
I'm
you know what,
alive.
Max?
I'm good.
You are good, and I want to give you a special shout out because, of course, last week on the show, I was not able to make it, and you stepped up and hosted the show, and I think you did a very good job.
Thank you very much. It's always fun. It's always stressful. It always feels like it goes twice as fast. So
See, and that I think now it's a good thing now, right? I'm back. Steve's gone. We've got the two real
yeah, the
technical
actual
experts.
yeah. We don't have to like do the podcast twice by the first going. Now, Steve, the on button, you press it and it turns on, and he goes, "Oh, I,
Right.
I get it now." And you go, "Yeah, you press the buttons, and it makes the screen go." And he goes, "Oh, okay, I get it now." And then we go, "Right now, remember that when we recorded." Then he regurgitates it and he sort of messes it all up, and
And
we can
that's the
just
thing.
do
Like,
it.
credit where credit's due. He's the face. I get it. He's
Yeah,
cute. People like him, but
yeah,
of course, the real brains behind the organization, you and
of
I, were going to hold
course.
things down this week.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And of course, it is a big week because SteamOS 3.5 is almost here.
Nearly.
And there are some pretty good updates here, some meaty stuff for us to get through. And I'm a couple of which I'm pretty excited about. I think there's some stuff here that we've been kind of waiting for a while, and it's excited to see it make it across the finish line
Hmm.
sooner than later, right? So some folks have already been talking about like that they've gotten access to some of the new features that are on the way. There's been some conversation on Reddit. There's a report over from Steam Deck Gaming that breaks down a lot of this stuff. So people are already are already seeing this stuff out in the wild, and I think it's we're probably talking a couple of days. I wouldn't be surprised if by next week we're already able to enjoy it for ourselves. So I think the big one, right, or at least the one you want to step off on is that HDR finally available.
Yes. Yeah. Now me and Steve spoke last week about because I was quite confused about when he said, "Oh yeah, HDR is going to be on the Steam Deck," and I thought, or I said to him, I think I assume that this current screen isn't HDR, and he said, "No, that's not the case." But it seems like in this sort of version we now see, it's only in docked mode, um, with a HDR compatible display, and it sort of doesn't really maybe hint out that there's like a HDR Steam Deck coming out. It's just like cool in docked mode, you'll be able to turn on HDR and enjoy your content
Yeah.
with more vibrant colors.
Yeah, which I think is fine, right? Like that was, one of the things we talked about with like the docking station during our review, right? Is like that idea of being able to unlock HDR support with an external display using your
Yeah,
Steam Deck, and like that's kind of, I think until we get a revision of the hardware, that's probably the best that we can hope for.
yeah,
But that's great. Like that's definitely a big win. I know that's something that Steve especially has been, very vocal about and frustrated by the
yeah.
fact that it didn't come at launch with the docking station, like I believe they originally told us it would, right? And obviously
Oh,
things
I didn't know
change, but
that. Okay.
nice to see that functionality finally come to the device. And a
I
note
wonder
here
if it
that
was already sorry, I wonder if it was already in the
no,
dock, if the dock already supported it and it's now just been added to SteamOS. Like, I wonder if you were to plug something that was HDR compatible into it, if that would work. I have no idea. I'm sure Steve would know, but
yeah, he'd be
interesting.
able to answer that one better than me. But one of the things that you highlighted here as well is that because there's also a brightness slider that's been
Mhm.
added for non HDR supported games. Like you do have the ability to play with settings on HDR supported screens. So even if you have a game that doesn't like officially support HDR, if you've got a really nice high quality screen that you can interact with, you do have a little bit more control to try to benefit those games that don't
Yeah.
natively support HDR, but that can still, unlock a little bit more potential in the visuals. So
Yeah.
I think that's really cool too. It's really nice to give us that ability to, that's the whole thing, right? Is giving
Yeah,
us that
yeah.
minutia of control.
Now, I don't think that it's per game, so I don't think you can go into, like, one game and turn on HDR, another game, not bother with it because, when you do the brightness slider, SteamDeckGaming.net, who I was sort of looking at for some of this information, said that the menus are affected. The sort of when you're just in the OS, that is also affected by the brightness slider. So it seems like it just works across the board. So I also don't know if you play with the brightness slider at all, if this content that is HDR, if that's going to be affected by it, or if it just swaps to HDR. But I assume that is the case because it's going to sort of do a different output. But yeah, this is good. This is like, you know, we always say that the screen is like the Steam Deck's biggest thing holding it back, and there is something a little bit later that also affects that. But like, yeah, being able to sort of plug into a TV and have better colors and just anything to improve that docked experience, more so than the handheld experience in some ways, is great. Just one more reason to sort of want to dock your Steam Deck, really.
Yeah, which is nice, right? Because I think, the Steam Deck docking station's been an interesting one because Steve and I, from the time that we reviewed it, right, have I think maintained the position that regardless of the issues that exist with it, right, that it doesn't necessarily have the best plug and play type experience.
Yeah,
It doesn't play super nice with Samsung TVs, which are obviously very common.
yeah,
Um, it's not without its problems, but I think for the value that you get, right, like with the inclusion of the second charger, it's pretty good bang for your buck. And one of the things that I remember talking about when we put out our review, which you can go check out on the channel, and then in the weeks later on the podcast as we would chat about it, is I think it's easy to have that mentality about anything when it comes to the Steam Deck where something doesn't quite meet expectations because this will happen, right? Valve will continue to support it and iterate and make the updates. And yeah, like maybe HDR wasn't there at launch, but it is now, right?
yeah,
And like that's good, you know? So I think even with some of the stuff that you're talking about, right? Like there's still room for improvement, I'm sure, with all of these systems. But like, I also have faith that they'll continue to work on it, and that the community will continue to work on it and figure out new ways to get us to the place where we want those experiences to be,
yeah,
right? And obviously, something like the screen, right, is something we're going to have to wait for a hardware revision for. But it is great to have more control to try and eke out whatever slight performance increases that you think are worth putting the time in to play with. You know?
yeah. And I think quite a few of these things that are happening are in this update are things that have been sort of either been like a Decky plugin, or they've been in the people have been trying to do it, or people have been trying to make it work themselves. Um, so yeah, I think it's good to see that Steam is taking these things that are already happening and that they're coming on. So
Yeah, so one of the things that we're kind of talking around, so why don't we jump to it? Right?
yeah,
Is
sure.
one of the you said there's another control that is impacting graphics, and it is connected to a very popular Decky plugin, and that is of course the ability to have like control over saturation, right?
Yeah, on Decky it was called Vibrant Deck, and it basically all it really does is just turn up the saturation. And when it was sort of put on, it was like, oh, in order to try and emulate like an OLED display, or like the Switch OLED, just to try and get more vibrancy out of it. And you could go too far with it, but just minor tweaks, subtle tweaks, you could make games look brighter and nicer, and all that stuff. And this is now baked directly into SteamOS. They've inputted it specifically into the hardware. Um,
And the nice thing is that it also works in docked mode, which was a problem
yeah,
with Vibrant Deck, which was that it didn't support external displays.
yes, yeah, when I was playing Donkey Kong Returns, Country Returns on the Wii version, and it, looked great when it was in handheld, and when I sort of plugged in this TV, I was like, "Oh, why does it look as good?" And it's because I had Vibrant Deck on, and I just didn't notice it. And eventually I turned it off because I was like, "Oh, I'm having like a worse experience docked than I am in handheld, and that's not what I want. I wanna have that parity like I have with the Switch, or
Sure.
if anything, the opposite, I'm on the big TV, let's have a nicer experience, otherwise it's not worth the effort." So yeah, but also unlike, I was gonna say, the default setting on it is actually makes the screen more vibrant than the standard setting. So before, where there was no control over it, unless you had Vibrant Deck plugged in, now with this update, the default setting for your saturation makes everything look a little bit nicer anyway. So excuse me. Clearly, they've also been tweaking what's displayed as well as giving you more control over it. They must obviously know that there is an issue and people do want more punch with the colors and the things that they're seeing on the
Sure.
screen.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And, again, right, like, I love, that we do see them kind of clearly paying attention to those Decky plugins and, like, like, obviously, there was the boot system was, I think, one of the early,
Oh,
very
yeah.
public examples of that, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, this just speaks to the fact that they clearly look at what the community's doing, and if they
Mhm.
find something like this that they think, is really a quality of life feature worth adding, then they work it in,
Yeah,
like,
well,
when
then
they can.
yeah, well, one more of those then. There is a Decky plugin for controlling music that Steve mentioned before. There is now a setting in quick settings. In fact, I updated to the beta channel earlier just to see if any of this sort of stuff was in there. And the only one of these features I have is the music section. So in the quick menu, along the sort of bottom, there's an icon that's like a little music thing, and you click on it. And that currently is just a link that you click on, and then it lets you browse through the soundtracks that are in your Steam library. But the fact there's a whole tab for it in the quick setting menus means there's clearly some more integration for music coming. Maybe you'll be able to connect your Spotify accounts or just have things in the background so while you're playing your games, you can have music. I personally hate this. I hate gaming and listening to podcasts, listening to music, or whatever. I like to be listening to what's in the game or sort of like the sound effects or, just
Yeah,
having that full experience without having like when I was younger, whenever I play or listen to Hybrid Theory, I now think about Legacy of Kain, Soul Reaver, and that's always linked for me. And I don't want that. If I finish a game, I don't want to
yeah,
be like, oh yeah, it really reminds me of a band, and then let's say something happens with that band in the future, and then the game's ruined. I'd rather just have them be separate
yeah.
things. But yeah, this is
Yeah, I
interesting because I know
get you.
people do like to have that. They like to put on their grinding games, or they like to have like their min maxes, their task manager games.
Sure.
Like Football Manager and stuff. And they like to have their own soundtracks. And yeah, I mean, it's just more choice, isn't it? And hey, maybe it'll be like the new iPod where you just carry a huge Steam Deck in your pocket to listen to
I
music.
would
You never
love
know.
that.
Yeah.
I used to use my PSP as an MP3 player, and that's how old I
Yeah.
am.
Yeah. I remember that.
Um, but we're dating
Well, do you
ourselves a
remember
bit with that one, but
Do you remember when Smash Brothers came out and you could have the music? There was a music mode where you could turn the screen off, and I was like,
yes.
"Who's walking around listening to Smash Brothers music, like, with the screen? Like, why don't you just play the game? Surely if you're moving around, you just got your Switch in your pocket?" I don't know.
Sometimes
Again,
you just
the
gotta
options
jam
are
out
great.
to it though, you know?
Well, exactly, yeah, it depends on the song. There are some bops on that, so
It's true. It is true. And, yeah, I feel you. Like, I'm generally more that type where, like, I wanna kinda be immersed in the game that I'm playing, but, Steve and I often talk about what we call TV games, right? Which are games that
Mhm,
are perfect to play with the sound off while you're watching something, or your partner's watching something or whatever, right? And you're kinda, like, half dialed in.
mhm.
So, like, I think there are situations where that comes up for me where I'm like, if I'm playing a game I've played a million times before, or I'm chatting with
Yeah.
friends or whatever, right? Like, it's nice to have that option if there is something like, maybe you're really into a certain puzzle game, but like you're sick of the music or whatever, right? And you're
Mhm.
like, I want to listen to whatever album I'm into right now and chip away or play some Tetris or whatever, right? Like, more control is always a good thing, right?
On the subject of TV games, do you have game TV where there are TV shows you're like, "I wanna play some games in handheld mode, but I don't wanna commit to it on the TV, so I'm gonna put some TV on in the background." So, like, I know that sometimes if I'm playing something really, really mundane, I will put the TV on. I won't do music, but I will just have the TV on in the background sometimes, and I think, like, there are some shows, like, specifically Seinfeld and Frasier that I just have on in the background while I'm, like
Yeah,
you say,
totally.
doing something
Totally.
mundane.
Oh, so you're saying
Um
like what are the shows I put on when I'm
Yeah,
doing
yeah, so
that?
instead
Oh
of
yeah.
TV games, what game
What are
TV do
the
you have?
I gotcha. I
Yeah,
gotcha.
yeah,
I
yeah.
gotcha. Yeah, I'd say it's similar, right? Like something like a Seinfeld is a good one because it's like it's a show I've seen multiple times. I would
Yeah.
say usually one of my go-tos is Bob's Burgers because that's
Yeah?
like probably my favorite. I mean, not even probably. It's my favorite show on TV right now, and it's
Mhm.
my wife's favorite show. So it's like an easy one to be like, hey, like pop this on. I've seen it a dozen times. I'll still get a laugh, whatever, right? I know Steve, like The Office, is a big one for him.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, I think a lot
Just
of
like
those types of
comfort
shows.
stuff you've seen that you don't
Yeah,
actually have to pay attention to, but every now and again you'll look up
yeah,
and go, "Oh, yeah, yeah, I have, like, It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia" is one of those for me, or there's just so
yeah, that's
many.
an easy one, or, like, Parks
Yeah.
and Rec is one I go back
Yeah,
to a lot,
yeah.
stuff like
Stuff
that
that
where it's like
in and out it's just comfort, like, it's
mhm,
just company while you're playing your game sometimes, let's say, like,
yeah.
you're not with anyone at the time or whatever.
Community's another one for
Yeah.
me. Historically, I would say Futurama, but it's been quite a few years since I did a rewatch of that.
Mhm.
So there's it's like you said, it's the old favorites, right?
Yeah,
It's the
yeah.
hits. We'll go back and throw that on, and it's like I was doing all that with like Vampire Survivor last year, right? Where
Yes,
it's
that's
like
exactly the game that I was thinking of
perfect.
earlier when I was saying, like, mundane, but not that I thought the game was mundane, but it's just like, I know what's going on here, and there's a certain point the game just plays itself, and I'm just walking around and, like, I'm
Yeah.
barely involved, so let's just have something
Marvel
on in the
Snap,
background.
another one for me like
Yep.
that, where like,
Yeah, I always
yeah,
play
let me
Marvel
jam
Snap
through a
with
couple
TV on
games
in the
while I got something.
background.
Yeah, it's an easy
Yeah,
one.
yeah.
Easy
We're
one.
we're
Anytime.
we're getting there, we're getting there. It does, however, affect my performance with certain games. So let's go back to something else in SteamOS 3.5, which is that the performance overlay, when you go into the quick menu and you can turn on like FPS, just the FPS in the top corner, or you can have more information along the top. I know that I don't know how people play full games with it on. I've definitely seen people that like care enough about the performance of the game they're currently playing that they will have it running constantly. And like I find it too distracting.
I find
Sometimes I'll
that to
have the
be
FPS.
like such an insane way to play a video
Yeah,
game
me
because it's like
too.
how like and like not ever, right? Because it's like obviously there's like purpose for it, like something like a
Mhm.
digital foundry or whatever, where like
Oh
you're
yeah.
trying to prove something. But folks who just have it on to have it on, it's like you're gonna notice if it's dropping frames. Do you need
Yeah,
to know
yeah.
exactly how many it is?
I
Like,
will sometimes have the frame counter in the top to identify problems. If I'm like, okay, like, what's going on here? What's wrong with the game? And I'll be like, "Oh, okay, I can see there's an error here or whatever. Like, lesson learned.
yeah,
If
sure.
I've
If
got a
you're
new
trying to
game and
like
I'm trying to get the
optimize
settings.
performance.
Yeah, exactly. If I'm trying to get the settings right, I'm like, okay, cool. What's the frame rate doing right now? Cool. But there's no need to have like the whole thing up at the top. Anyway, I digress. It's basically the same as it was before. But they have added, they've sort of changed a couple of things around. They've changed the name of FPS from like game score just to FPS now. I don't know what game score even was really. They've added a new metric though, which is the only sort of major change, and it's a VRAM metric, VRAM performance. Now, I don't know if you remember, we spoke about a couple of days ago about how Jedi Survivor needed 24 gigabytes of VRAM or something like that before it was patched, and it was like, you had to like SLI to 2080s to get like, or 1080s to get full performance out of it, something ridiculous like that. I don't know. So you'd be able to see exactly how like not fun Jedi Survivor is for you, exactly how poorly it's performing for you on your Steam Deck because you can see exactly how much VRAM is being used, which
You get to
which I'm sure.
intimately understand the ways in which it's failing you.
Exactly, exactly, and I think that a lot of games actually include this when you go into the settings and you change some of the settings around, it tells you that generally, like, how much VRAM that's gonna use, and you can say, "Okay, I've got this much VRAM, uh, this game's gonna use this much VRAM." You can, "Okay, I'll tweak it up a little bit, I'll get it as close to it as I want to," or, "Okay, no, I want great performance, I'm gonna whack it all down." But it's nice to have that sort of little extra thing, I guess, if it's just one extra little metric for you to check yourself. So, yeah, that's not a huge change, just a little something there.
It's so funny. The you mentioned this, and I saw somebody on the subreddit earlier today when I was like putting some of the stories together for the show, and they were saying that they had turned this off, and they're like, "Oh, I'm noticing that like my performance is better without the performance monitoring on." And I was like, "That's not a very useful tool, then, is it?" So,
I mean,
yeah,
I guess
hopefully,
you could be right. I guess maybe it could be it's a process, right?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
right.
that is funny. Like, who watches the watch
If you're trying to
anyway?
play like a really intensive game, it's like, oh, that
Yeah.
little bit of extra headroom,
Yeah,
might
yeah,
might
yeah.
help you out.
I've become the very thing I hate, which is poor performance. Shall I see us home here with this last bit then, Pete?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So the final new thing that is in this update is there's been a new scaling option spotted alongside. So before you could go to scaling, there was like normal bilinear FSR, and that was like I don't know the specifics of it. I think I know what FSR is. FSR is it sort of like has it at a smaller resolution. It renders the game at a lower resolution, and then um, up reses. What's what I'm looking for?
Upscales.
Upscales. Thank you. Upscales that to the native resolution, and you're supposed to be able to get better performance out of that because it's not running the game at the full resolution. Now, the FSR that's built into the Steam Deck is different to FSR 2.0 or NVIDIA's version, which is DLSS, which is in sort of built into games. So a game will support FSR 2.0, uh, and you'll be able to in the game set it on, and it will automatically do all the jigging for you. It will change all the things, make everything smaller, make all, like the resolution smaller or lower, sorry, and then upscale it in a way that looks nice and because it's very powerful. FSR, DLSS specifically. I remember when Death Stranding came out on PC, and people were like, "The performance on this game is amazing because you can use DLSS to really get the most out of it." And people saying this is the kind of technology the Switch needs. Where instead of having to run a game at 570p because the game won't run, you render it at 570p, but you display it at 720p, and you might be able to get some extra performance out of it.
It works
So
pretty well, and like
yeah.
that's something that has been used for quite some time, right? Like that was even something that was used in some of the and correct me if I'm wrong, folks at home, but I believe that was the case with the Xbox 360 even
Mhm,
back then, right? Because the original version, right, didn't support true 1080. It was the 720 upscale,
mhm.
and it's like if it works, it works.
Oh, absolutely,
You
yeah,
don't
and
notice
these
it.
and it's just coming in leaps and bounds. So the one that's on the Steam Deck already isn't that, it's just standard FSR, which is it no matter what the game is, it doesn't do it at like a proper, like, inside the game is working to do it for you, it just renders it lower, upscales it, right? That's FSR. So where I'm going with this is the new scaling option that's alongside that is NIS, which is NVIDIA Image Scaling, which is a new different, type of scaling. It's not going to be as powerful as DLSS because it's not per game, but it's a new option, really. Sadly, there's not much information out there that I've seen about how well this performs, if it's better than FSR, what the sort of why would you use it, the NVIDIA one over FSR? Is it even just in like a beta right now, or it's just in like a preview build and it's never actually going to make it to 3.5? But people are using 3.5 now, as we've seen before. So there's a good chance it's in there, but we don't necessarily know exactly how it is. But hopefully there'll be some more testing. We'll be able to have some more information out for you before 3.5 hits, so that when you do want to try these options out, you'll be able to try and get the best performance you can. Interestingly, on the
I
topic, oh sorry, go on.
I was gonna just say, on the subject of this, I don't know if I'm talking out of my ass here, right? But like, I'm wondering if the purpose of this is similar to the brightness slider that we talked about earlier, right? Where it's like, yeah, like a native FSR like that's built in game is going to be better and more
Hmm.
effective, but if you have something that doesn't support that, then you can use this other system
Yeah,
and
yeah,
right,
yeah.
like
But
that's what
well,
it
so
sounds like.
well, the standard FSR does that. That's what the standard, because in the settings of the Steam Deck, you
And
can
that's
turn on
base. That
FSR.
doesn't need to be supported in game.
No, no, that just works for any game. You
Okay.
can, yeah, yeah, any
Okay.
game does it. It's, yeah, if it's on 2.0, I think even FSR 1.0, I think actually is also the same sort of thing. That has to be built into the game.
Okay.
Um, and you go into the
Interesting.
game settings and change it, whereas this works on, like, emulated games as well. You can turn it on and it will sort of change how things look, and
Oh.
I have it on just all the time, because sometimes, sometimes I'll turn it off and go, "Oh, yeah, why is this on?" And go, "Okay, actually, I preferred how it looks before." I just forget to turn it off sometimes as well, so yeah. So this is like, yeah, it's just
I
like a
guess
second option.
I guess that's part of like the experience I had emulating like PS2 games and seeing like,
Mhm.
oh, this actually just runs better than it did on the native hardware.
Yeah.
That's must be the process that I'm experiencing there. So
Yeah,
that
yeah,
makes
yeah.
sense. Okay. So that's interesting. Yeah, I'd love to learn more about this and what the use case is for it
Mhm.
that's unique
Oh,
and like
yeah, why would you
why.
need 2 options for it? Which I'm
Because
pretty
obviously
sure.
there's a thing, right?
Mhm.
There's something that FSR is not addressing, and that this is obviously going to circumvent that in some way.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Or it's just options, or it could even be, I don't know if there's anything like, if your screen supports, VSync, not G-Sync. I think I've got that the right way around.
Oh, okay.
I
Yeah.
think I've got that
Yeah, I
right
mean,
around, but,
yeah,
like, whichever
maybe
way it
maybe
is.
this has to do with external displays and
Yeah.
that like this is like a more that yeah, it's interesting. I'd
FreeSync
love to
or
learn more
VSync.
about it. I
I
hope
don't
more
know.
comes out by the
Yeah.
time next week rolls around so we can talk about it a little bit more.
Yeah, well, hopefully, yeah, hopefully, by the time 3.5 actually hits stable and everyone has it, people will have messed around with it in preview and in beta, and it might not even make it stable, but if it does, we'll have information for you then. So yeah, the only omission from this list is something that the only thing that Steve's ever mentioned about 3.5 in the last like month
Shin
or
Megami
whatever.
Tensei.
Shin Megami Tensei, SMT, something multi-threading. He's gonna hate if he does listen back to this, which I know he doesn't listen to.
Surface. Yeah, he doesn't listen back. He doesn't know.
He doesn't listen to the shows he's not on. He listens to the shows that he is on, just not the ones that he's not on.
Just but he skips past when we talk. He just wants to hear his
Yeah,
own
yeah, yeah.
voice.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. Yeah, SMT was it was a way of, so in Power Tools in Decky, you could turn down the number of sort of threads or cores that are active at any one time, and you get better performance. If a game uses less cores, you could turn that down and you would get better performance. SMT does that automatically, as far as I know. And Steve's been talking about this for weeks, but it might still be in there. But in my research, and specifically in this sort of rundown that Steam Deck Gaming had of the stuff that they've used, doesn't seem to mention SMT. It could be this is just something in the background that happens without you turning it off or on. It just does it automatically just to get the best performance. But I do feel like it'll be odd, especially considering one, it's a PC, and two, the amount of control you do have over things, that there's not a toggle for SMT.
It's simultaneous multi-threading. That was what it stands for.
Simultaneous. I was close.
It is a
Um,
technique that allows multiple different threads to run concurrently on the same CPU to improve the overall performance of the CPU.
mhm. There we go.
Thanks,
Um,
SteamDeckHQ.com.
you've saved my ass there. But yeah, there's it's just not here. So it could be that it's still coming and people just haven't seen it, or it could be that it was taken out, or it could be that it still needs some more work, or something like that. Who
I,
knows?
and I this to me feels a little bit reminiscent of what I just talked about with the Steam Deck docking station, where it's like prior to release, they're like, oh yeah, it's gonna have HDR support and this and
Mhm.
that, and then it comes out and they're like, later though. That it'll
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
like it'll happen, but not
There was
now.
an asterisk you
Uh,
just couldn't see. There was a white asterisk on the
yeah,
white
yeah,
background.
no, we didn't say it was gonna be like right away, and
Yeah,
I
yeah.
it feels kind of like that where it's like I'm sure it's still coming. Like they promised it. I believe them that it will come, but
Oh yeah, yeah.
it's
I
just a
just think
matter of
it's
like
odd. I This is like if I'm having an argument with like a partner, right? And I'm like a gaslighting piece of shit or something, or and Steve's been saying SMTST, and I'm like, I just think it's funny how you said there was SMT coming. Like, I'm fine, Steve. It's absolutely fine. I just think it's funny how
I just think it's really
there's no
interesting.
SC. Yeah, I just think it's interesting how you mentioned SMTs all the time. It's just not here. Like, I just think that's really funny and really interesting. I think not that I'm upset or anything. It's just funny, isn't it, really, Steve, that you said that? I know you don't listen to this, Steve. Where the fuck is the SMT? I know you specifically work on the Steam
Here's
Deck. Where the fuck is it?
here's what I need. Here's what I need from you, the listener, is clip that out and send it to Steve so we know that he watched it.
But
Okay,
like
that's
spam
the only
him
way.
with it. Steve at flipscreen.games. I'll give you his home address in the comments. Send it to
Go
him.
on Mastodon. That's where he's at.
Mastodon. Yeah, yeah. Don't tweet him anymore. Um,
You can. I just don't know if he'll see them.
no, he probably won't.
He'll see them the next time I make him go on Twitter to tweet something.
Go to the bakery he works at, because he's always posting pictures of bread. I assume he works at a bakery, right? Take to the streets and ask Steve where SMT is.
Take to the streets. Oh my gosh. Speaking of taking to the streets, I think it's time to take us into our next segment here. Unless you've got any closing thoughts on the Steam OS 3.5 update.
No, I was hoping to have more closing thoughts because I was hoping to be able to access it, because originally I thought it was already out, and I went in and had a look. I updated and it's not there. So no closing thoughts. Look forward to what
Better luck next
Steve
week.
Yeah, I look forward to seeing what Steve has next week on some of these things. I look forward to maybe I'll make him listen to this section so he can at least correct me on all the things I've got wrong here. Um, oh yeah, also I'm not a scientist, so don't hold me accountable to anything, listeners. Thank you.
I'm just a simple small town podcaster.
I'm just a face and a voice, please.
But you can't claim to be the number one tastemaker and not know this stuff,
Oh,
man.
I can have taste. I don't need to know to have taste. That's just a feeling. That's a vibe. That's just good opinion.
I'm a vibe expert, okay?
Absolutely.
Speaking of vibe experts, our Patreon producers for the month of April are nothing but vibe experts. And of course, they are Arnold J. Rimmer, Christopher Valens, Earth Visitor, Gabriel Hasselmeyer, aka Asobi, Snackago, Ty the Dude, and Wakahula. Thank you all so much for your support over on patreon.com/flipscreengames. You're all the reals to the real, and we greatly appreciate your support of this and all of our sister shows. If you want to be a vibe tastemaker just like them, head over to patreon.com/flipscreengames, where you can show your support, get some good perks and goodies, including early access to the show, preferential treatment with getting your questions read, and all kinds of good stuff. And of course, more importantly than any of that, you help us keep the mics on, you help us keep the lights on, you help us keep doing what we're doing here at Flip Screen Games. And of course, we greatly appreciate you. But if you don't have any money to toss our way, guess what? There's a bunch of ways that you can get involved and show your support that will not cost you a pretty penny. You head over to flipscreen.games and you can find links to every one of them. You can keep the conversation rolling over on the Discord. You can write into the show with our email address, questions@flipscreen.games, if you want to get involved with the question block. However you choose to show your support or get involved with the show, we greatly appreciate you tuning in for another episode of the Steam Deck podcast. We've got a lot more show ahead of us, but before that, let me give you a word from our. Try that one again, Max.
Come
And try that one
on.
again. But before that, let me give you a word from our sponsors over at Manscaped. Support for the Steam Deck podcast is brought to you by Manscaped, the best in men's below-the-waist grooming. Manscaped offers precision-engineered tools for your family jewels. Manscaped recently launched the Ultimate Men's Hygiene Bundle, the Performance Package. Inside, you'll find the Lawnmower 4.0 trimmer, Weed Whacker ear and nose hair trimmer, Crop Preserver ball deodorant, Crop Reviver toner, Performance boxer briefs, and a travel bag to hold all your brand new goodies. Join the over 7 million men and roughly 14 million balls worldwide who trust Manscaped with this exclusive offer for our listeners. 20% off and free worldwide shipping with the code STEAMDECK at manscaped.com. We've all been there. You've got a big date coming up and you want your balls feeling as fresh and aerodynamic as possible. With my old buzzer, I was only one slip of the hand away from disaster. Now, thanks to Manscaped's Lawnmower 4.0, I can keep my downstairs hairs neat and tidy without fear. Their 4th generation trimmer features a cutting-edge ceramic blade to reduce grooming accidents thanks to their advanced skin-safe technology. The Lawnmower 4.0 is waterproof and even has a 4000K LED spotlight for when you need a more precise shave. Trust me when I say this, fellas. Your balls will thank you. Get 20% off and free shipping today with the code STEAMDECK when you check out at manscaped.com. That's 20% off with free shipping at manscaped.com when you use the code STEAMDECK. Unlock your confidence and always use the right tools for the job with Manscaped. Nailed it that time. Nailed it.
Perfect.
And they can't, not every shot's going to fall, but 9 times out of 10, your boy's got it. You know it. So
Wish.
we're back. We're gonna jump into this. We got a follow-up from last week's show
Yes,
where you and Steve finally got into it and answered a question from a member of the community. Go ahead.
I was desperate to talk about this. I was champing at the bit. Sorry, I was like ravenous to talk about this.
Yeah, it was a solid 2 or 3 weeks where we're like, we have our list,
yeah.
we're ready to go, and finally we got to it. We talked about Shitty Food's question from last week, talking about kind of what are great games to pick up on Steam Deck that are not available on Switch, right? And trying to kind of fill in that library because Shitty Food had been saying that, like verging on buyer's remorse, right? Because it's like, what am I doing on this thing? I need more time to spend on it. So Shitty Food wrote with a reply to that segment as well as a new question for this week. So they wrote in and said, "Thanks heaps for answering my question. Much appreciated. The value of my Steam wish list is now extra intimidating." You got a whole new problem now. There you go.
I'm glad that we could ruin your life and ruin your bank account, but also give you lots to look forward to, lots of things to play.
Absolutely.
And if anyone else listened to any of those predictions, went out and played those games, tell us what you think of them. We'd like to hear that I am the number one tastemaker. We'd like confirmation on that. But also we'd like to know that you're sort of, getting some value out of this show by enjoying the games that we tell you to play. So,
I think that, you know what, Max, now that I'm thinking about it, because we already have of course, the right now, right? The Seminole Award, the Embassi Trophy here for our predictions game.
You printed yourself and you had made yourself and you paid for it.
I mean, I didn't. The company paid for it. I don't know what you're talking about. It was your Patreon dollars made this happen. So my question is, I think we got to find a way to test who's the best tastemaker.
Who's the number one tastemaker?
We do some kind of poll at the end of the year of the community. How many games did you play based on our recommendations? And maybe we get a second trophy. We get another one in competition. I think that would be pretty cool.
Maybe we need to change it to something else, because if I lose that, I'm not calling myself the number one tastemaker anymore. I have to always be that. So maybe we can call it like influencer of the year.
I mean,
the
maybe, but I feel like
influencer of 2023.
I feel like it would be pretty cool if you had to defend the title. You gotta put your money where your mouth is.
Right,
I believe you can do it, Max. I believe you can. I believe you can.
I'm the only one that played God
in
of War
predictions.
and
I don't know.
Elden Ring
I don't
last
think
year.
so.
Well, maybe not, but I'm the only one who played Elden Ring and God of War last year. No one else did.
You did.
Scared.
Right, exactly. You were the only one that played our two most, I'm just saying, you got it. You got something, kid. And I feel like, it's time to introduce some more. We need maybe it's a belt, maybe it's another trophy. I don't know, but we need more accolades.
Always do with a new belt. Trousers falling down all the time from all the games I've got in my pockets, you know?
I think unfortunately, technically, it's more of a cummerbund because it wouldn't really keep your pants up. So we
Yeah,
could get. I'll just get you a belt if you need
could
one.
always
But
do with a girdle. Could always do with a girdle to keep the gut in while I'm playing my games, you know?
I don't hate that. I don't hate that. So anyway,
Sorry, yeah, continue with the question.
Shifu continued on to say, also, I thought I'd grown out of being terrified by Resident Evil. I have not. I
Now I'm
think
curious
you've.
about what sorry, go on.
No, no, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was gonna say I'm curious about specifically what game was played that made them just immediately terrified by our Resident Evil again. Like
How
I'm
many did you
I'm
suggest? Was it 2
4, I think.
or
It was 2, 2,
okay?
3, 2, 3, 7, and Village. So 4 games. So any one of those could have been the one. Um,
They're all pretty scary.
oh yeah. Well, I think if you're talking about like just if you just played the intro and you were like, I don't want to play that anymore. That sounds like uh that sounds like 7 to me because it has like the most like ooh, but
Oh yeah, that intro is so it's
mhm.
so unsettling. It's
Yeah,
a
whereas like
lot.
there's a lot more like here's the characters, here's the story in the other games. Whereas this is very it's very much like what's going on? You know, we're rebooting everything. But yeah.
Yeah.
What were you gonna say? Sorry, I interrupted you before to
No, no,
say
no,
that.
you're good. I was gonna just say, I obviously I missed last week's show, so I
Mhm.
would love to just briefly touch on this, to get a couple of contenders in case y'all didn't hit them, right? I'm assuming you hit a lot of the stuff I want to talk about though, because I think for me, right, like the I I think there's 3 use cases to answer this specific question, right? Of like,
Mhm.
what are the games you want to play on Steam Deck that you can't play on Nintendo Switch? And I think rather than like getting into individual games, for me, it's categories of games, right? It's hot indies that are not yet out on the
Mhm.
Nintendo Switch is the number one, right? For me, last year, if you need some recommendations, some of these games have come to Switch, but at the time they weren't. Cult of the Lamb was a big
Yeah.
one for me. Really,
Which
really at home on Steam
even
Deck.
even now on the Switch hasn't performed very well from my best understanding. So
Interesting. Okay.
all
Well,
right.
works great on Steam Deck. So that's a great one.
Yeah.
Roller Drome, another one that was a
Yeah.
lot of fun. Really loved it. I think that kind of experience really lends itself to
Mhm.
Steam Deck. I think obviously the other kind of big category is like big AAA games that you would never see on Switch, whether it's because they can't play or because like licensing isn't going to come together the way that you want it to. Stuff like Elden Ring obviously is
Mhm.
is a
Big
huge
one.
one. But I think shout outs of course to all the Sony games, Last of Us Part One notwithstanding. Those games
Yeah.
all run really well. Steve
Yeah.
has sung the praises of like Days Gone and what's the I'm blanking on Hideo Kojima and Norman
Death
Reedus's
Stranding, I mentioned
Death
it earlier.
Death Stranding. And
Yeah,
right,
there
of
there
course.
is neither of us mentioned those games, but yeah, there's a lot to be said about, yeah, those PlayStation games, those games that are on PC, you know, because it is a PC, that's what you gotta remember about the Steam Deck sometimes, isn't it?
Yeah, right. And it's like, those were 2 games that I know Steve really loved playing on PS4. Something like Spider-Man, right? Runs really well. Miles Morales,
Mhm.
God of War. These are great games. And whether you've not played them because you're not a PlayStation gamer or, maybe you played them a couple years ago and you'd love to try them again in handheld and chip away at them in like a more casual way, I think those games are really, really right at home. And I think those kinds of experiences are surprisingly good on Steam Deck. And we're going to talk a little bit more about some of those games when we get to the top 20 games that were played in May. A lot of really good entries on that list.
Spoilers.
So yeah, spoilers for the next segment. But the last thing I want to highlight is, of course, it's classics, it's retro games, right?
Yep.
I think the Steam Deck is the best emulator that's ever existed, and I stand by that. I've been emulating games since I was 13, right? Maybe a little younger, maybe 12. And, I've hacked a lot of consoles to play emulators. I've bought, you know, some of the mini stuff and played with that. Like I've done it on the PC with like library organizers and like
Mhm.
I've gone through a lot of different iterations of it. I've never had a device that was as easily set up and that had the
Mhm.
perfect plug and play experience that like you don't need to fuck with save states, you
Yeah.
don't need to mess with settings, like and you can get more out of those things if you want, but if you just want to play retro games as if they were natively on a piece of hardware. What a novel fucking concept in 2023. The Steam Deck is the best. It's
Yeah.
truly the best.
And it's powerful enough that you can play generations that you would have never been able to play before on handheld devices, well, unless you have the more expensive ones from before, like the GPD Win and stuff like that. But yeah,
Right.
to have a device that is so easy to just like, cool, here's all the emulators at once. I'm just going to drop all the files I need in. I can now be playing these games, and I don't have to mess with anything, change any controls. I just play. Fantastic emulation device. I think I said last week. I think I mentioned emulation, but not retro stuff. I said more like not like that retro. I was saying more like PS3 era, maybe
Sure.
PS2 era. Those kind of games that you can't really play elsewhere anymore. Um, those are perfect on the Steam Deck.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, and I mean, like, I've played a lot of games like that, right? Like, when we were first getting into the Steam Deck, like, I replayed Tony Hawk's Underground, one of my favorite games of all time, which will probably not ever get a re-release now, right? Maybe we'll see what happens with this ABK, acquisition, but, um that's one that, like, I've been dying for that for ages, right? Of like, I love that game. I love the soundtrack. I love the story. Like, there's so much there that I was excited to get back to, and it's like it just works and it runs better than it did then, right? And there's no load times, FPS is stable, and it's great. It's a great experience. And I think that extends to like a lot of the pixel stuff that I've played there. The display on the Steam Deck for as much as the screen could be better, like playing Game Boy Advance games, they look perfect. They look great, and I you know, I I don't want to spoil this, but I guess I will. I am in the process of like getting into CRTs a little bit, and like I'm gonna cook up a tutorial on like how to set your Steam Deck up to play retro games on a CRT and like get that more like classic, like pixel perfect representation of something like a Final Fantasy 7 or something like that, and it's just such a powerful, versatile machine in that way. And I think like I've been impressed by how easy it is to play multiplayer games because that was always a tough thing with emulators is like, how do you connect multiple controllers to your PC and is
yeah,
it going to manage them well? And, then you got to map everything and it gets messy and it was never easy. It was never seamless and plug and play. This is right. Like I've played Melee on, on the Steam Deck and it's a great experience. It's
yeah.
awesome, you know?
Well, you have all
Um,
so many extra plugs, don't you? I guess
yeah,
with this, you can plug it into the dock, and you've got like 3 USBs, 4 USBs, or whatever it is. So
easy.
yeah, perfect.
And then, I mean, the other thing is like I've been getting into ROM hacks a lot in the last
Hmm.
year or so, and like those are things that I've never really played with that much because I just generally, it's not as fun to play a Game Boy game on a PC as it is
Yeah,
on a dedicated device. It just isn't.
yeah. It's
So
made
like
to feel in your hands, right?
yeah, it's a console. It feels like a console, right? And there's the coziness of a small screen where a old game that's small displays better, And like I played through Pokemon Radical Red, last year, and I had a lot of fun with that. I've been playing Pokemon Blue Kaizo right now, which I'm adoring, and it's just such a great experience, And I think we had a whole conversation in the PlayStation channel recently because one of our Patreon producers, Earth Visitor, picked up a PlayStation 1 and was like, let me get some old games. Like, I want to get into this library. Like, for anybody who, is of any age, right? Whatever age you are, there's generations of game. Unless I guess you're Steve's dad, there's generations of video games that you weren't around for that you don't know, right? And like being able to go back and experience those, and not just play the hits, like not just
Yeah,
play the big famous stuff, but be like, yeah, like let me get into this goofy licensed game that I remember from when I could play Space Jam on the PS1,
yeah.
which I loved as a kid. And like, is it a great game? Maybe not, but I
No,
liked it and it was
no,
fun to
no.
go
It's not.
back to. But like
Yeah,
that's fun, like
yeah,
and you're not gonna get that experience as consistently on these other platforms because it's like the weird, goofy license stuff or the stuff from smaller publishers and devs, like it's just not gonna come to the platforms, you know?
I sat down for 2 hours a couple of weeks ago, and I just played Peggle on my Steam Deck. I played fucking Peggle for two
Hell
hours.
yeah.
I had a fucking great time. A friend of mine was like, "Oh, look, I've got Peggle on my phone. I got an APK of the old mobile version." And like, it was fucked up, and the sound didn't work. And I was like, "All right, cool. opened up my Steam Deck. Obviously, I already had it installed. Booted up Peggle, and I was just like, "Bang! Here's like a better experience. I'm playing Peggle now, bro. Whatever, fuck you." And it was great, and I enjoyed it, and I couldn't do that anywhere else. But apparently, a Peggle 2 exists. I found out this weekend. Peggle 2 is
You
like an
didn't know that?
Xbox and PlayStation exclusive. So I've never seen it because I've never owned
Yeah.
those systems when it was out. Did not know it existed. Peggle 2. How the fuck do I get to play that? I can't play it.
What a
It's
time to be
impossible.
alive.
I know. That's what we need to get. Campaign for Peggle. Take to the streets. Don't know what.
Take to the streets.
Take
Peggle
to
2
the
on Steam
streets.
Deck.
Peggle 2 on Steam.
So yeah, hopefully that's helpful to you, Shanifa. I know you've got a ton of games on your list already, but if you want to add some more options to your list, those are my use cases for the Steam Deck. That's
Mhm.
where I get the most of my mileage these days. Oh, and I'll say this, just because I'm assuming that neither of you did last week. Persona 5 Royal. Persona
Yeah,
5
no,
Royal is
none
one of the best
neither of
games
us
on
said that.
Steam Deck by a country fucking mile. That game runs buttery smooth on Steam Deck. So if you're at all interested in a big meaty, JRPG that's got some, great story and good life sim stuff, all that, if you've ever thought about taking the plunge on Persona, I don't think there's a better place to play those games than on Steam Deck. That's for sure. But that wasn't all. Shitty also said, I think you've sort of addressed this in the past, but I do have a question for Max. Do you have any experience running non Steam games with the DXVK async or the more recent GPL launch commands? And would you recommend them? Also, can we assume that by utilizing GPL by default with the new drivers, we should see reduced stutter in non Steam games? Or would the availability of pre cache shaders for non Steam games still be an amazing thing if feasible?
Okay, so I read this question and I decided to do the proper research. I went to the books. I hit Google. I was like trying to see what it was that so I could answer this question properly. And I have no fucking idea, man. What any of this means. I'm sorry. I don't know if you confuse me with Steve, the actual, which I know we say a lot that we're the real experts, and technically that is still true. None of these words that you've used here have entered my brain and triggered anything or tingled anything. Like, no, this doesn't mean anything to me, unfortunately. What I will do is
I have
save
a
this
feeling
question.
Steve will be
Yeah,
able
yeah,
to
yeah.
answer this.
What I
So
will
we'll
do is I
save it
will
for
save
next
this for
week.
next week when Pete's not here and it's just me and Steve, and then Steve can explain to me, an idiot, what this means, and then I can explain it to you as if I'm not an idiot, pretending I'm not an idiot, and then you'll go, "What a fucking idiot." Obviously, you already know what this means anyway, but because you've asked the question. But yeah, sorry, I don't have a clue what these words mean, and I really was like, "All right, cool, let's see if I can do this." And I was just like, "Nah, this is beyond me."
Like,
I
I'm not
could
going to
tell.
show my whole ass answering this question.
Yeah, yeah, I can tell you how to enter the BIOS by holding down, like, minus or the minus button when you turn on the I don't fucking know. Um, but yeah, I appreciate the question. I appreciate that you wrote in and asked us something. I'm afraid that without Steve here to be my, eyes, ears, mouth, brain, everything else, I can't do anything about it. I'm really sorry, Shitty Foo. But, yeah, tune in
We'll get
next
you
week
next week.
for when Steve answers that question.
Yeah, keep it tuned. So we're gonna close things out with an update from the official Steam Deck Twitter account at On Deck, and they released as they are wont to do
They
every
love it.
month.
They love it.
They threw out their top 20 games in terms of playtime,
Mhm.
sorted by playtime on Steam Deck. And I think I, I'm always interested in this list because I think month to month, it doesn't always change much,
I feel
but
like
it's
it
always
never changes.
interesting. It does when you watch it over time, though. And I think that's what's interesting about it. Because the last
Okay.
time we looked at it, right, Witcher 3 was one of the top games. And it's like you look at it now and it's like working its way down to the bottom of the list,
Now, I
and
don't know
it's
if I
like,
just wasn't here for a period of time, but I feel like the last time we looked at this, I might have missed this, was, when we looked at the year. We looked at the whole year, and I was guessing the top of the year because it was Steam Deck's first birthday, right? And you
yes,
had
we did
played a
do
game
that.
with me, and I did a little bit of guessing, right? And
You did pretty good.
I felt like I did alright, yeah. But I feel like looking at this list, not much has really changed. Like, even things like Brotato that I'm pretty sure was on the original list that I hadn't heard of, that it's odd to still see that here, not because, I am the tastemaker, but not because I'm the be all and end all, of what games there are. I just feel like there's so many. games on here. There's so many games that come out all the time, and so many games, so many conversations about games to happen. None of them are about Potato, which I just think it's interesting that that's like one of the most popular games on the Steam Deck, sort of seemingly for a lot of the last year and still this month now. Yeah.
Yeah, it is funny, and I feel like it's interesting because I think like in a 2 to 3 month period, you probably see the same games. You just start to see them cycle as like
Mhm.
because and it's interesting because like there'll be I say artificial, but like there will be these kind of things that create bumps for games, right? Like Witcher
Like
3.
sales and stuff.
Sales is a great one, right? Like
Mhm.
Skyrim is near the bottom of this list again, right? Whereas like it was near the top, I want to say last month because there had been a big sale. Obviously Witcher 3 like got its big update that made it jump to the top of the list. Red Dead Redemption 2, right, was a game that did not run on Steam Deck and then it got a patch that made it work and then now it's been in the top 5 every month. So it's kind of funny, right? Because another game that's been on the list for a really long time since it came to Steam, Persona 5 Royal, and it's now the 19th game on the list. Like you can see, people are probably finishing it and moving on to something else, and they'll probably won't come back until there is maybe a big sale or another push or whatever, right? So it's interesting because it's like, maybe next month, right? Like maybe they finally patch The Last of Us enough that it works, and then that jumps to the top of the list, or Jedi Survivor jumps to the top of the list because it finally
Mhm.
works. And so I think it's worth going through and just touching base on these a little bit, and if anything sticks out. So this is the top 20 in order as it stands. Vampire Survivors, strong number one
Always.
for quite some
Every
time
time.
now. Elden Ring, same deal, strong number two for quite some
Yeah.
time. Hogwarts Legacy, I think it's similarly sat around that space since it's one of the newer games this year. Stardew Valley at number 4, old reliable, that makes sense. Resident Evil
Always a
4,
classic.
again, hot game, makes sense, right? We just had the remake. Red Dead Redemption 2, again, had a big update that let it become playable within the last few months. Probably a lot of people still chipping away at it for the first time, or maybe their second playthrough here on Steam Deck. Grand Theft Auto 5 is the next one. Cyberpunk 2077, another one, right? Had a big update and jumped, right? Became one of the most played games for a while. Dredge, Hades, No Man's Sky, Binding of Isaac Rebirth, Potato, Witcher 3 Wild Hunt, The Elder Scrolls 5 Skyrim Special Edition, Monster Hunter Rise, Fallout 4, Slay the Spire, Persona 5 Royal, and Dead Cells
It's
are your top
interesting that
20
you
games.
mentioned earlier when you mentioned how Jedi Survivor might make a showing sort of next month or in a couple of months. It's interesting how Fallen Order hasn't sort of crept up in the list in the lead up to the new game coming out. I've just had a
You'd
quick
think,
double check
right?
this day. You'd think like as the game starts to come out, people are going to go, okay, I'll play the previous one. Especially
Yeah.
considering it came back to being playable on the deck in the last couple of months.
Yeah, you'd think, but it's one of those interesting things where it's like I feel like that can kind of be a double edged sword, right? Because sometimes people are like, "Oh, I want to replay it so I can like get the story fresh in my mind and like be ready to jump back in." But I think you also see sometimes people go the opposite direction, where like
Mhm.
Steve and I talked ourselves out of replaying Breath of the Wild the last 3 years because we've like, well, surely Breath of the Wild 2 is coming, right? And then
Yeah,
now
yeah,
Tears of the
yeah.
Kingdom. Surely Tears of the Kingdom is coming out this year or next year, right? So like I don't want to replay it now. I want to
Mhm.
I want to be hungry for it when it comes out, right? I could see that. And it's not a short game either, you know? But you'd think. I
You would
wonder,
think.
you know what? Yeah, I don't know. Maybe this month you see it go up a little bit cuz maybe people started playing it, you know,
Yeah,
and
maybe
it's
that's
like
the
it's
case,
May
yeah.
today, right? As of this recording, today's May the 4th, right? Star Wars Day. Maybe people are in kind of a Star Wars mood, but I don't know.
Mhm.
Maybe people are playing it on console, right? Because it's historically run better on console, right? Like, or at least now, right? Because I know we talked all about it on FSG about how, comparing the original launch
Yeah,
version of
yeah,
the
yeah.
game, but
So
like you
now,
look at
yeah.
it, yeah, you look at it on Series X or PS5 now, and it runs really well.
Oh, yeah, 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 compared to the Steam Deck, yeah, and also it's also very cheap over there very often,
Yeah, I mean, pretty sure,
so
I'm pretty sure it's on Game Pass. No, yeah,
I've got
no, it
no
is
idea.
because it's
Being
EA.
like EA
Yeah, it's on
Play,
Game
yeah, very
Pass. You
maybe,
can play it for
yeah.
free.
Yeah, yeah,
So, I
well,
mean,
yeah,
that's
there
the
we
other
go.
thing,
Yeah,
right? Is
those are your options.
maybe even PC players that are playing it on Game Pass and
Mhm.
not on Steam Deck, right? Because it's
Yeah.
it's cheap.
Oh, makes sense. Yeah. Shout out to Dredge on this list, by the way. Glad to see that game get some love. I saw that they announced some post-launch content and some paid DLC coming soon. So I'm quite looking forward to digging back into that game. So yeah, that's a good game on the list. Just a good list of good games. Monster Hunter Rise always good to see. Red Dead 2, I'm surprised that runs well. I know they recently like made it work on the Steam Deck, but yeah,
I
interesting.
know. It's kind of nuts that it runs as well as it does. But I don't know. I mean, I think the thing I love the most about this list is I love how many old games are on it. That's something I've always appreciated about PC is I feel like games like have way longer tails and like people
Mhm.
get to them when they get to them and there's the sales and everything. Like there's always a time to jump into something old, right? But it's like you look at this, right? The number 4 game is Stardew Valley. Like, that's awesome, right? Like,
Yeah,
that's a super
great.
old game,
Yeah.
beloved though, right? Resident Evil 4, Grand Theft Auto 5, Red Dead Redemption 2, Cyberpunk, Hades, No Man's Sky, Binding of Isaac, Witcher 3, Elder Scrolls, Fallout 4, Persona 5 Royal, Dead Cell. These are all old games. Some more
Mhm.
than others. Some are only like 2, 3 years old, but none of
Yeah.
them are new, and like
No.
some of them are very old, right? Like Witcher 3 is that was a launch title practically on the PS4,
Yeah.
like
2020, like 15 or something like that, I think it was. But
yeah,
also you have to see things like Hogwarts Legacy, Resident Evil 4 being up there. There are
sure.
some other games, but yeah, it is mostly like but I guess also that's just the Steam Deck, I guess, isn't it? Is it probably can't play those games as well as people would like them to, and the games that are on
Right.
there are sort of it's good that they do play well. Also, I feel like what I like about this list all the time is it shows how versatile the Steam Deck is in that, like, I don't know if you actually might have just said that, thinking about it, I've just, taken it out of my mind. But yeah, like you say, old games, new games, pixel art indies, fucking Elden Ring, Hogwarts Legacy, like, 2 of the biggest years of last year. Last year? When did Hogwarts come out? This year. Like, being one of
This
the
year.
biggest games
Yeah.
last yeah, 2 of the biggest games. Resident Evil 4, like, there's a huge variety, and the Steam Deck is the only place that lets you play all of these in a handheld format. I mean, actually, it might even be is anything on here exclusive to PC?
I don't think
Uh,
so.
so the Xbox can play all of these games, I think. Yes. Okay, so yeah, then handheld only, whatever. Um, yeah, it's
But
just
still,
a good place. It's a
yeah.
good place to play games.
Yeah, I mean, increasingly, it's a platform I've really enjoyed to be on since I got into it, and I think it's like consistently a really great place to play.
Mhm.
But it's like you look at the evolution of these features, and little by little, I think that's what the most exciting thing about the Steam Deck is feeling like you're part of something, and that you see that growth month to month, and that you get to be a part of the ebb and flow of it all. You know.
Yeah.
All right, gang. So, if you want to be a part of the ebb and flow of it all here at Flip Screen Games, remember, there's a bunch of ways you can get involved. Head over to flipscreen.games. That's our website where you can find a dozen plus ways to get involved, share your support, join the community, write into the show. However you choose to get involved, we really appreciate you guys spending some time with us this week and tuning in for another episode of the Steam Deck podcast. For the crew, I've been Pete. He's been Max. We'll see you next week.
Bye.